Hey guys, it's Lucky Ghost here. Today we're going to talk about the Solo Magicka Templar. This build hits really hard. For the most part, it's also indestructible. The one time that this build finds itself feeling a little bit vulnerable is when running to a mob. Once we get to our enemy, once we get to the boss, to the mob, we have no problem staying alive. At that point, we can plant our feet, we can start dishing out damage, which is going to bring back a ton of life. But on the way to the mob, that's when I felt the most vulnerable, but don't worry, we've got ways to deal with that. I ran this build through Vateshran Hallows on Veteran, and the final boss has never felt so easy. I had a lot of fun in there on this guy. I ran him through Maelstrom Arena, and that's when I felt vulnerable traveling long distances to close the gaps on ranged mobs. And like I mentioned, I slotted something to deal with that, so it's not going to be a problem for you. All right, let's talk about our skills. The first ability on our front bar is going to be Mystic Orb. This ability projects a globe of annihilation that slowly floats forward, dealing 1000 magic damage every half second to nearby enemies. This is one of the best AoE abilities in the game. It does a ton of damage to everything near it. It's a really hard ability to pass up on Magicka tunes because of how effective it is. The second ability on our front bar is going to be Puncturing Sweep. This is the heart of the Templar. Launch a relentless assault, striking enemies in front of you 4 times with your Aedric Spear. The spear deals 2,688 damage to the closest enemy and 1,000 magic damage to all other enemies. Each strike reduces movement speed to the closest enemy by 40% for 1 second. You heal for 40% of the damage done with this ability. So again, not only is this ability doing a ton of damage, it's also bringing 40% of that damage back to you as a heal. This is one of the reasons why when we get to our opponent, it's very difficult to kill us. It's just getting to the enemy that can sometimes leave you feeling slightly vulnerable. The third ability on the front bar is going to be Radiant Glory. This is one of the most fun skills in the game. You burn an enemy with a ray of holy fire, dealing 8,800 magic damage over 1.8 seconds. It deals up to 480% more damage to enemies below 50% health. You also heal for 20% of the damage inflicted. So here you have an ability that does an insane amount of damage once the enemy is in execute, and it's going to heal you for 20% of that again. So whether you're jabbing or whether you're using your Radiant Glory, it's very difficult to kill you. And these abilities are part of why this build hits so hard. All right, the fourth ability on the front bar is Dampen Magic. This is the ability I slotted to deal with the fact that while I'm in transition from one enemy to the next, I can feel a little bit vulnerable because I don't have any source of life coming in while they're plinking at me from afar. So we can just tap Dampen Magic a couple of times on our way to them, which is going to convert a portion of your Magicka into a protective ward, gaining a damage shield that absorbs 9,500 damage for 6 seconds. The damage shield strength is capped at 60% of your health. So we're going to use this anytime we are taking damage, but we're not able to dish it back out yet. For example, when we're closing the gap on an enemy that is attacking us. All right, next up, Barb Trap. Set a sharpened blade trap at your location, which takes 1.5 seconds to arm and lasts for 1 minute. When triggered, the trap deals 1,600 physical damage in addition to 5,700 physical damage over 16 seconds. And it grants you minor force, increasing your critical damage by 10% for the duration. Enemies who activate the trap are also immobilized for 2 seconds. The reason that we're using this ability is for the minor force. It's going to give a small dot there, but that's not really a significant amount of damage. But the damage increase we get from having all of our critical damage do 10% more damage is very substantial. And we're using the Fighter's Guild ability Barb Trap instead of Channeled Acceleration because this is going to draw from our stamina pool, whereas Channeled Acceleration would draw from our Magicka pool. And since we aren't using our stamina for anything else, it's a nice little free ability most of the time. If you're in a fight where you find yourself strapped for stamina, you can go ahead and replace this with any ability that you want, such as Channeled Acceleration, just to spare yourself some of that stamina drain. As for the front bar ultimate, we're going to use Fiery Rage. Create a cataclysmic storm at the target location that builds for 2 seconds, then lays waste to all enemies in the area, dealing 8,300 flame damage every 1 second, 7 seconds. That is a ton of damage, and an AoE. So when you cast this over a group of mobs, they will feel it. They're going to take a lot of damage. Most of the time, unless it's a boss fight, they're going to be dead at the end. On to the back bar. For the first skill on the back bar, we're going to use Unstable Wall of Elements. This is going to do a lot for us. It's going to proc our weapon enchantment on our back bar weapon. It's also going to be taking advantage of the set bonus from the Maelstrom weapon, which is going to make our light attacks do more damage. And it's going to do a nice little dot on top of all of that. Unstable Wall of Elements is a fantastic ability, especially when paired with the Maelstrom weapon. The second ability on the back bar is going to be Blazing Spear. You send your spear into the heavens, bringing down a shower of divine wrath, dealing 6,500 magic damage to enemies in the area and an additional 670 magic damage every 1 second for 10 seconds. Basically what this is an AoE dot, and you'll see when you cast it that it actually affects a very large area. The third ability on our back bar is Consuming Trap. It lays claim to an enemy soul, dealing 11,000 magic damage over 10 seconds. The damage dealt is based on your highest offensive stat. If an affected enemy dies, you fill an empty soul gem and heal for 3,000. You also restore 5,900 magicka and 2,100 stamina. So essentially what this is free sustain. It's a great dot, and when the enemy that the dot is on dies, you get a ton of resources and some health back. Anytime you find yourself running out of sustain, just make sure you cast this on the enemy before you kill it, and your sustain problem should be alleviated. The fourth ability on the back bar is Elemental Drain. We're going to use this ability for two reasons. One is it's going to provide Major Breach for 22 seconds. That's going to reduce the enemy's spell resistance by 6,000. That means we're going to hit them a lot harder because they're going to be resisting our abilities a lot less. It's also going to apply minor magic steal to the enemy for 22 seconds, which causes us to restore 168 magicka every 1 second while we're damaging them. This is great for our sustain, and it's great for our damage. The fifth ability on the back bar is Channeled Focus. Create a rune of celestial protection. While active, the rune grants you major resolve, increasing your physical and spell resistance by 6,000. You also recover 240 magicka every 1 second. Standing within the rune increases your physical resistances and spell resistances granted by 50%. So what this means is when we put this on the ground and plant our feet, combined with all of the health stealing abilities that we've got on our front bar, it's very unlikely that we will die. Basically, you throw down these back bar dots, you hit them with your Elemental Drain, you plant your Channeled Focus, you move to the front bar, and you start doing those life-stealing abilities as soon as possible. When things do hit you, you hardly feel it. And if they hurt, you bring that life back so fast with all of those lifesteal abilities, which is one of the reasons this build is so fun. You get to stand toe-to-toe with your enemy. In fact, that's where you shine. For the back bar ultimate, we're going to slot Crescent Sweep. It's a nice, cheap ultimate that you can use in a pinch if you want to. I hardly ever use this. I save up my ult charge until I get enough to cast my front bar ultimate, as that's going to deal significantly more damage. But, you know, if the fight's coming to an end and you want to slap them one more time to end it quicker, here's a nice, cheap ultimate to use. All right, as for our gear, if you don't have access to trial gear, go ahead and run Julianos on the body and Mother Sorrow on the jewelry and front bar. Mother Sorrow provides an amazing amount of critical damage, and it's hard to beat. You can substitute Medusa instead of Mother Sorrow if you would like to get that Minor Force passive from Barb Trap without having to run Barb Trap. If you do this, go ahead and replace Barb Trap with something like Inner Light or any flexibility that you would desire. If you have access to trial gear, go ahead and replace Julianos with False Gods. False Gods is a fun set to run while soloing. It's going to give you a ton of damage, and it's also going to reduce the cost of your magicka abilities by 8%. And when an enemy you damaged dies, you restore 2,400 magicka and get Major Expedition for 8 seconds, which increases our move speed by 30%. So, as always, I highly recommend False Gods on solo builds because not only does it provide a great amount of damage, but it's also going to give you mobility and sustain. Two things that you definitely need while soloing. For the monster helmet, I highly recommend something like Swarm Mother or Damahas. Swarm Mother and Damahas have something in common when it comes to their one-piece bonus. They both provide both maximum stamina and maximum magicka, and on solo builds, you're going to need both. As for the back bar, I highly recommend the Maelstrom Inferno Staff. This is going to buff our light attacks and our heavy attacks against any enemy that is standing in our wall of elements. And last but not least, the Ring of the Pale Order. And this item is incredibly fun, although it's definitely not mandatory to any of my solo builds. It's a ton of fun to use while they let us. It's very possible that someday in the future they're going to nerf this item, so I would highly recommend getting it and using it while you can. It's a lot of fun. Don't miss out on it before it's gone. The Ring of the Pale Order is going to restore 18% of the damage you deal as health, up to a maximum of 2,750 health per attack. You cannot be healed by anyone but yourself. So, use this when you're soloing, but definitely take it off when you get into a group with a healer. It's a bit of a wasted slot if you have a healer there to heal you. Not only that, but they won't be able to heal you if you're wearing it. When you get into a group, go ahead and wear 2 pieces of your monster set and get your monster bonus instead. As for the race, the best in slot choices would be Breton or High Elf. Any race will work, but those 2 are best suited to the task. The Breton is going to give you fantastic sustain through spell cost reduction and Magicka recovery. It's also going to give you spell resistance, which is going to make you a bit harder to kill. Whereas the High Elf is spec'd for damage. It's going to give you Magicka and spell damage, allowing you to hit as hard as possible. All right, next up are passives. We're going to take all of our class passives. We're going to take all of the destruction staff passives, all of the light armor passives, the first 3 heavy armor passives. We're going to take the 2nd and 3rd Fighters Guild passives, Slayer and Banish the Wicked. We're going to take both of the Undaunted passives. We're going to take all of our racial passives. And of course, we're going to take Medicinal Use inside of the Alchemy line. Medicinal Use is going to allow our potions to last as long as the cooldown, so that we can have 100% uptime on those amazing potion buffs. Don't underestimate those things. Speaking of consumables, we're going to be running Witch Mother's Potent Brew. Witch Mother's Potent Brew increases our max Magicka by 2,856, our max health by 3,094, and gives us 315 Magicka recovery for 2 hours. This is a great food to wear from level 1. It's unique in that it scales with your level, so a lot of food has level requirements. But with Witch Mother's Brew, you can buy it as soon as you can afford it, and you can start using it there because the level requirement is only level 1. As for our potions, we're going to use Essence of Spell Power when we're doing something difficult. This is going to grant us Major Sorcery, increasing our spell damage by 20%. Major Prophecy, which is going to grant us 2,629 spell critical rating. And it's going to restore 7,500 Magicka while giving us 40% increased Magicka recovery for the duration. If you're not doing something difficult, you're more than fine to use the Essence of Magicka potions that you find off of dead mobs. For the Mundus, while we're playing solo, we're going to take Lover's Mundus for extra penetration, as hitting the pen cap is usually difficult while soloing. If you start doing more group play, be sure to switch over to the Shadow Mundus since it's free, as that's going to allow you to do more damage in a group because your tank and your healer are going to be providing plenty of penetration for you. As for our champion points, we are going to put 72 into Thaumaturge, 3 into Piercing. Those 3 into Piercing are just so that we can get the Exploiter passive, which increases our damage done against off-balance enemies by 10%. We're going to put 52 into Master at Arms, 23 into Staff Expert, 49 into Elemental Expert, 15 into Spell Erosion, and 56 into Elfborn. For the green tree, we're going to put 40 into Shadow Ward, 51 into Tumbling, 75 into Arcanist, 49 into Tenacity, 19 into Sprinter, 5 into Bashing Focus, 31 into Warlord. And for the red tree, we'll put 11 into Quick Recovery, 49 into Elemental Defender, 49 into Hardy, 48 into Thick-Skinned, 32 into Spell Shield, and 81 into Ironclad. As for this character's rotation, what you're going to do is start by debuffing the enemy with Elemental Drain. Then you will place your back bar dots and buffs. So you'll throw down your Wall of Elements, your Blazing Spear, your Consuming Trap, and your Channeled Focus. Then you can switch to the front bar, throw out your front bar dot, Mystic Orb, and your buff, Barb Trap, and then go into jabs. You'll go ahead and jab anytime all of your dots are ticking. Once your back bar buffs start dropping, go ahead and switch to the back bar, reapply them as necessary, and then jab whenever you're able to. When the enemy hits execute, go ahead and start using Radiant Glory. Remember, this ability does more damage the lower their health below 50%. Feel free to use Dampen Magic anytime you're trying to close the gap between yourself and another enemy and you're taking damage and you need to protect yourself. And that's it, guys, and that's all there is to the Solo Magicka Templar. It's a fun build. The rotation is fairly simple and straightforward, as we are mostly relying on our jabs to dish out tons of damage while we're throwing down a buff and a debuff to help ourselves stay alive and pump out a little extra damage as well. If you have any questions about this build, please don't hesitate to ask. If you found this build helpful, be sure to like and subscribe so you can get notified when I put out updates and future builds. If you want to hang out with someone else that loves ESO, be sure to swing by my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/LuckyGhostTV. I stream ESO over there 5 days a week, so I hope to see you there. As always, I will link the written guide in the description below so that you can easily look at any of the build information such as gear, traits, enchants, and champion points at any time. Until the next video, guys, happy hunting.